We're continuing to spend our time in the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms is a whole gathering of songs that were used for worship, used in the temple. But there's a whole set of songs that were not used in the temple. They were used outside of the temple. They are called songs of ascent. Ascent meaning going up. Songs for going up. You need to understand the culture, the history, and a little bit of geography to understand why they're called songs of going up. You see, Old Testament Jewish culture centered around 7 annual festivals that took place in the city of Jerusalem, in specifically worship in the temple. Right? And so 7 times a year, the people, if you were able, would come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover or the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the First Fruits Festival, the Harvest Festival, the Trumpets Festival, Tabernacles, or Day of Atonement. So if you were able, you would come to worship and celebrate. Now, Jerusalem was a city built on the top of a mountain. And so if you were making that journey, coming up the main road from the neighboring city of Jericho up to Jerusalem, which is the path most people would end up taking, you would be going up in a very short time 1,100 meters. It's like, if you're from around here, it's like climbing to the top of La Maliciosa that some of us did on a hike last year. That's a long ways to go up. One person wrote, "This journey was a tough hike, walking uphill almost 1,100 meters in elevation over a relatively short distance, ears popping, brow sweating, heart pounding." Okay, this was serious going up. And these roads to Jerusalem, and specifically this one from Jericho to Jerusalem, would be packed with thousands of people going to the temple, going to the festival. Many of them traveling as a family by foot, camping along this side of the road on the way. And as they walked to Jerusalem, they would sing these songs. They would sing these psalms of ascent to prepare themselves for worship, to get ready, so that by the time they reached the temple, they were ready to meet God. That's why they're called songs of ascent. Songs to prepare yourself as you go up to worship. Songs for before church. And Psalm 95 is one of the main songs that they sang as they travel. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to a party that's hosted by God, which is what these festivals really were, right? And this psalm has all the parts of a good invitation that you would expect. When you receive an invitation, first of all, it tells you what to expect if you're going to come. You know, a wedding invitation, it tells you where the wedding's going to be, where the party afterwards is going to be. Will it be dinner or just drinks? If it's a birthday party, it will tell you if it includes lunch, games, cake and ice cream. Well, verses 1 and 2 start with the come, you're invited. Right? It says, "Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and songs. Come, let's celebrate God." That's the purpose. That's what this party is all about. It's the same purpose of our worship every Sunday, right? Come here together to meet God, to sing, to give thanks, to praise. This is our invitation to come into God's presence. This invitation then goes on to tell them why they should come, why we should come to the party. What's our incentive for saying yes to this invitation? Well, the first word of verse 3 is for. So come to the party for. Because for the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry ground. Why should we come? Why should they come? Right, this was a big trip to go to Jerusalem for them. They had to close down their homes or their business. They had to make a days-long hike as a family, camping by the side of the road on the way. Why should they do all that? Because God deserves it. He's the great God, the great King above kings. Right? He holds all creation in his hands. He holds you in his hands. Why should they make the effort? Because God deserves it. Why should you and I make the effort to come to worship on a Sunday morning? Why should we spend that time in the car? Why should we give a big part of our weekend, our day off? Because God deserves it. He's the great God and the great King. He holds all creation in his hands, and he holds you in his hands. So come. Come celebrate. Come meet God. Here's your invitation. Now, I'll be honest, I've had a lot of invitations in my life. Invitations to weddings, to other celebrations that I didn't really want to go to. My desire to go to these events often depended on how well I knew the people inviting me. The less I knew them, the less I really wanted to go. The same is true for coming to worship, isn't it? How well we know God determines how we're going to respond to this invitation to come and celebrate him and worship him. And so people who don't know God and don't love God, they have zero incentive to come. Anything else will be better for them than coming to church, than coming to this worship celebration. They would rather sleep in on a Sunday morning, or binge on Netflix, or play video games, or even clean the house. That's even better. And this is true for most people, isn't it? Most people are not interested in saying yes to this invitation because they don't know God and they don't love God. Other people know God, but they don't really love him. And so they hear this invitation, and maybe they do come to church, but they don't really worship when they come here. They don't really meet God. They miss the main point. So, years ago, Stacy and I attended the wedding of a distant friend. Right? Somebody who we hadn't, a cousin who we weren't close to, right? We drove 3 hours to the wedding, and we had a good time there. It was really fun. But while we were there, we weren't really celebrating the wedding that much. We didn't know this cousin all that well. And so we had a great time visiting with other relatives, people who we knew and liked who had flown in for the wedding. We had a great time spending time with them, but we weren't really there for the wedding. Right? We kind of missed the main point. Sometimes we miss the main point when we come to worship. We're really here to meet our friends, to enjoy the coffee time before or after. Or maybe we come because we feel good that we've been here, because we've always been told that we need to come, we should come. But we're not really here to celebrate and sing and praise. We're not really here to meet God. Those are the people who know God but don't really love him that much. And then there's those who know God and love him. And they hear this invitation and they are able to truly celebrate. They can't help but sing when they remember God's great gift of salvation given to them and the hope that is theirs in this life and for eternity because of Jesus. And they can't help but give thanks to God for His grace and His power in their lives. And they can't help but celebrate the presence of God, the joy of God, the King of Kings in their lives. They can't help but find joy in worship when they step into the presence of God. Right? And these sounds of ascent reminded people as they came to worship who God is as they traveled to meet Him, so that they got more and more excited. They got more and more ready to be in His presence and worship Him. They're reminded of how great God is. They're told stories of what He's done in the past, of His power and His love and His goodness. And it all focused their minds and their hearts on God. So once they arrive, they are ready to worship. So it makes me wonder how well prepared we are for worship on Sunday mornings. Sunday mornings are often some of the most difficult times of the week. I think that's because the enemy doesn't want us to be ready for worship. And on Sunday mornings before church, that enemy is going to do anything he can to distract you, to divert you from worship, from focusing on God. And so often it's on Sunday mornings that we're running late, and so we come here rushed and tense, or on Sunday mornings our kids have especially bad attitudes, right? They can get up and get out of bed on time to get to school, but getting to church is like pulling teeth, and you knock heads with your kids on Sunday mornings, and you're frustrated by the time you get here. Or doesn't it seem like Sunday mornings is the time when you have an argument with your husband or your wife and you arrive angry? And then we wonder why worship wasn't so good this morning, right? Or maybe it's because we weren't ready. We didn't prepare at all. So why not try something different next Sunday? Maybe every Sunday. Start, as the people in the Old Testament did, start preparing for worship even before you arrive. What the sounds of ascent do, what can you do to prepare your heart to meet God? Maybe it's as easy as setting your Sunday morning alarm 15 minutes earlier so that you arrive here on time and not rushed. Maybe on the way here you start thinking about God and reflect on how He worked in your life over the past week. Look around, if you're not the one driving, at the beauty of creation, of what God has made. Reflect on, maybe share out loud with the person you're traveling with, coming with, ways that He has blessed you, ways that God has been good. Maybe it's as simple as playing worship songs in your car as you drive here, or reading the passage for the day before you come. Read it on Sunday mornings before you even get here. So you've already read Psalm 95, and you're already thinking about what we might be hearing. How can you get rid of distractions and start focusing on God before you even arrive? Try it and see if it doesn't change your heart. See if it doesn't prepare you to meet God. And so you interact and experience Him in a whole new way. So give that a try, because if you are ready for worship, then there's a second invitation waiting for you here in Psalm 95. Right? Verse 6 starts again with the word come for the second time. Right? Verse 6, come. Let us bow down in worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. Think about that. What an extreme difference. What a big change from the first come. But the first was come and sing and shout and praise because God is so great. And now it says come and quietly bow and kneel before him. It's a lot more intimate. This invitation is a lot more personal. And why should we say yes to quietly bowing and kneeling? What's our incentive? Verse 7. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. Our incentive to bow and kneel is that we belong to him. Right? This is a very personal invitation to come into God's presence for those who know him and love him. Right? This is an intimate relationship with God, with the God of the universe, that brings the joyful celebration that we started with, the joyful celebration that we experience as a group. It's this intimate relationship that brings that celebration into a tender worship in your heart, in my heart. A meeting of God, not in this room altogether only, but personally here in my heart. The difference is we sing and shout and praise because he is the God. We bow and kneel because he is our God, my God. So if you don't know God personally, then this invitation to kneel and bow isn't going to make any sense to you. You will not be interested. But if you do know God as the Lord of your life, as your loving Savior, as the source of your joy and hope, as the good Father who loves you, as the Son Jesus who gave everything to save you, if you know him like that, then this is a marvelous invitation to experience his tender love as a child of his, under his care, under the care of a good Father. You are invited. You're invited to sing and shout and praise the God of the universe, and you are invited to bow and kneel to your God, the God who loves you. And like many invitations that we receive, Psalm 95 asks you to RSVP. You need to give an answer of whether you're going to come or not. Right? God wants to know if you're going to show up at his celebration. Pick it up again in 7 through the end, right? Just the last line of 7. It says, today, if you would hear his voice, if you receive this invitation, right? Do not harden your hearts as you did in Meribah, as you did that day in Massah, in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they have not known my ways. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. God hopes that you will say yes to his invitation, that you will not harden your heart. Right? This song, as they traveled up to Jerusalem, reminded the people of Israel of the time when they said no to God's invitation. When they forgot that God was the great king and they said no to trusting him and being in his presence. Right? They remembered back to when they were traveling in the desert out of Egypt. They're between Egypt and the promised land. They had just started their journey. God's going to bring them right to the promised land, and they're thirsty and they can't find water. And they forget how God has provided everything for them, and they just grumble, complain, and curse. They harden their hearts, and they don't trust God. They don't sing. They don't give thanks. They don't praise. They don't kneel. They don't bow. They turn away. Last week, we talked about a psalm of pain, right? Pain that can either turn us away from God or turn us towards God in the hope that He gives. And remember the time when their pain turned them away from God. And they say, let's remember that. And this time, let's make sure we say yes. Let's be ready to worship. Yes, God, I'm coming. I'll be there. This decision to accept God's invitation to worship is a heart decision. Any of us can make excuses of why we don't come to worship, or why, if we're here, we don't worship. It was a late night last night. I was just tired. I didn't like the music, and that wasn't very helpful for me. Or the sermon wasn't all very good this morning. Or, man, it was just too hot for me to be able to worship today. You know what? It's a choice of our hearts if we're going to worship or not. If we're going to meet God here, or we're going to choose not to. Because nothing can stop a heart that truly is in love with God and wants to worship Him. Nothing's going to stop that heart from worship. Because worship doesn't depend on the music. It doesn't depend on the pastor. It doesn't depend on the temperature. It depends on a heart that's ready to meet God. The only excuse we have is a hardness of our hearts. Today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts. Today, God is inviting you to His celebration. And it's the most important invitation you will ever receive. And if you read the fine print of this invitation from Psalm 95, you're going to realize that there's an after party here. There's an eternal celebration immediately following this one. Because if we choose to worship God here in this life, then we are invited to worship Him for eternity, to join the eternal celebration. But if we harden our hearts here in this life, then we will not be able to attend that eternal celebration afterwards. And God so badly wants you with Him now and for eternity. He wants you with Him so badly that He was willing to send His own Son, Jesus, to die on a cross, to pay the price for your sin and my sin, so that we could be forgiven, so that we might receive this invitation to the party. We might receive this invitation to a relationship with Him. And that Son, Jesus Christ, rose from the dead to make this eternal celebration possible for you and for me. And He wants nothing more than for you to be there. And so God gives us all this invitation. Come to the celebration. Come into my presence. And He leaves the response up to us. The response for daily worship celebration and for the eternal celebration. Our response can be yes. Yes, I'm coming. For many, it's no thank you. Not interested. Not coming. The invitation goes to all. The response is yours. And it's a matter of the heart. Do we have a soft heart or a hardened heart? So Psalm 95 is your invitation to the greatest celebration ever. Not just this place, not any place, but it's a celebration bringing you to a person, to the God of the universe who absolutely loves you. Will you come? Will you come? Or will you harden your heart? Prepare yourself. Prepare your heart to be ready to meet God. Say yes to his invitation to you.